of the day considers how leadership skills can have an impact on communities, in particular agricultural suppliers in Africa. Our keynote speaker is Trevor Waldock, founder and CEO of the NGO Emerging Leaders. They've trained more than 50,000 people in 15 countries with an indirect impact on over 2.5 million people. Trevor's background in corporate leadership development and his conviction that world-class leadership can be brought to the world's most vulnerable communities has created Emerging Leaders' mission to equip the youth to lead themselves out of poverty. Please welcome Trevor Waldock.
Thanks, Martine. Thank you. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to those online. A very close friend of mine said, when they heard I was speaking at 5 o'clock, they said, don't worry, they'll all have gone home anyway. But I feel like I've gone round in full circle. I started in the corporate world, so I kind of started where you are seated, if this works. So that was me teaching in the corporate world. But 2005, from my corporate job, I found myself in Chihuahua. Chihuahua is not a place that most of you probably will go to. Chihuahua is one of the most desperate slums on the edge of Lusaka in Zambia. And I went there 2005, May, at the height of the impact of HIV/AIDS. And to say it was a life-changing event brings me here. Because from my corporate world, as I looked around what I saw, I thought, you know, people will not get out of poverty unless they learn to lead themselves out of poverty. So with that conviction in one half of my head and the other conviction that said, look, leadership has been around for over 3,000 years. There are principles like gravity. If we could find those principles, they should work if they're a principle. And if we could bring those principles together in the right way and make them accessible, we could see transformation in lives from the poor onwards. So that was the birth of Emerging Leaders. This is me with in the early days I would train with armed guards. This is me with my armed guards in Uganda. This is training in a mud hut in Malawi. So what was the story that brings me back here to a conference in the corporate world on supply chains? Since 2012, we started working with supply chains as an avenue to reach into the lives of these young people, into the communities. And since 2013, we started partnering with Marks & Spencer's, who I cannot praise highly enough for their vision and their walk the talk on these issues. So we've partnered with them. I'm going to share stories with you just on that aspect of our strategy. And the stories that I tell come from independent data researchers, both the qualitative and the quantitative. So most of what I say will be backed up by that independent research, which I'm happy to share with anyone. So come with me to start with to northern Johannesburg. We arrive at a part of a factory to do with one part of the supply chain, and John greets me and he says, Trevor, it's been amazing since the training happened. I said, well, what is it? He said, people are walking differently. He said, when I greet them, they are looking me in the eye now. They never ever did that. He said, and they call me by name. That's never happened. He said, when they come in the morning into the factory and sign their names, he said, you won't believe this, but they're even signing their names differently. Now, come further down the Western Cape. I pull up in my car into another part of the supply chain. I get out of the car and there's some shouting going on, and I look over and there's two young guys shouting at me and waving something. So I go over, and as I get close, I realize it's two young gardeners from this particular part of the supply chain who we trained 4 months earlier. And I come up close to them, and before I even greet them, they say, Trevor, we've still got our pen. Now, that doesn't mean anything to you, but to us, we had a good laugh, because what they were telling me is, Trevor, we are still leading our lives. We are still the authors of our story since you last saw us. So I say to them, I said, now, what are you doing? How's it going? And of course, I know what they're doing. They're in their overalls. This is the guys. They're in their overalls, and they're weeding. So I say to them, what are you doing? Their answer is what surprises me. They said, Trevor, we are putting a smile on the face of the business for the public. Now, wouldn't you want that level of mission clarity from your lowest paid workers? Come across another continent, India, into the garment. We've been working with Marks & Spencer's within the garment factories of India, north and south. We arrive in Bangalore in one particular factory a week after we've just run some pilots to test out whether Leadership for Life will work in that context, to be greeted by the wife of the factory owner. And she says, you won't believe what's happened in the last week. She said, the workers are coming through the gates different. She said, they're laughing and they're joking and there's energy. She said, we've never had that before. So the question is this: what's going on here? The answer is people are waking up. That's what you're seeing. People are waking up. Now, what does waking up look like when it's fully woken up to the lowest paid worker in a supply chain? It looks like this. This is independent impact data on the impact of the Leadership for Life training into the supply chain workers. 84% improvement in health. 161% increase in family savings. 85% increase in uptake of educational opportunity. 82% increase in income generating activity. And what I want you to just briefly notice about this is the businesses did not have to increase any of the workers' salaries. What happened in their family life as a result of the training is family income went up. Another data piece shows family income went up 43% without it costing the factories a penny. Retention and recruitment costs of the staff went down 50%. Respect between staff and management up by 67%. 93% reported increase in worker proactivity. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? So let me just back up a little bit and try and make sense of what was happening. Back in 1968, when I was just heading off to secondary school, because I'm quite tall, I used to do high jump, there were two ways of doing high jump. I don't know whether you remember what they were. Scissors and straddle. That's all there was. And scissors and straddle got you so far. Scissors and straddle, if you pushed it to the limit, you could get pretty high. That summer, 1968, Mexico Olympics, the bar is set at 2.2 meters. Everybody knocks it down. Until a young American called Dick Fosbury comes along and clears 2.2 meters and changes the way that high jump has been done since. Every other Olympic record, pretty much since early 70s till now, has been broken using the Fosbury flop. You see, scissors and straddle will get you so far. Like compliance, it will get you so far. But to get beyond, to get the more, to get the higher, does not require a little bit more effort. It requires something completely different. That's the difference. It requires a fundamental shift. It's that Marshall Goldsmith thing that says, what got you here will not get you there. Our observation working in supply chains on the issues around beyond compliance is what got you here will not get you there. Something different is required. Now, as a leadership consultant background, I have to have an equation up there. We still recognize you've got to have great leadership, all right? No one's saying that has to go. And we're also saying you've got to have effective management, and I would put compliance in there. Most of what I've heard this morning is management, not leadership. But you need that. Plus something will get you beyond compliance. What is it that we have observed that gets you data like I have just quoted you? The answer is this, is that we were invited by Marks and Spencer's to invest in the leadership potential of every worker. And I mean every worker. I'm talking the managing director down to the guys that weed the front lawn. That is the missing piece. Now, how does this work? Let's look at it this way. What's the worker that you want? Now, what's the worker that you want in your businesses? What's the workers that any of the supply chain factories, what do they want? I think you'd answer it something like this. Well, what we'd love is we'd love a really proactive worker. That would be great. We would love someone who is a creative problem solver. That would be brilliant. We would love someone who, if they saw a problem, would take responsibility. It would be brilliant if people saw that something wasn't working, that they would change it. It would be terrific if people came with an interdependent way of working. And lastly, it would be great to trust them, to have a trustworthy character. That's the worker we all want, isn't it? All of us, rich or poor, that's the kind of worker that you want. The interesting thing is all the characteristics that I have just listed for you are the characteristics of leadership. Also interesting is they are exactly the same characteristics of human flourishing. Also interesting is they are the same characteristics as the liberation of human rights. See, one of our problems is the problem with leadership, and believe me, since 2005 with emerging leaders, I have struggled with this word leadership because people say, can't you just not use the word leader? And I've even had people in your position say to me, you surely don't believe you can teach leadership to those weed pickers, because they're not leaders, are they? They said that to the wrong person. You see, part of our problem in the room is this. Our understanding of the word leader has been shaped by the last 200 years of Western history. So we have a view of leadership, and it's about position. It's about power. It's about role. Now, of course, you need positions, and everybody has power. It's who you use it for. That's the issue. But here's our conviction. When we started this work back in 2005, I was thinking, how do you explain leadership to these women who are looking after 9 AIDS orphans in a 9-by-9 room? How do you explain it? Do you know where I got the definition from for them? Howard Gardner, Harvard University. He says, leadership is the ability to create a story that affects the thoughts, the feelings, and the actions of other people. You see, everybody's life here is a real story. Your life is a real story. It's being written every day. You wrote a chapter yesterday. You're writing another one today. The issue is simply this. Who's got the pen? Because if you don't have the pen to write your story, it means someone else does. This is the story of intergenerational poverty. Now, when you have that definition of leadership coming out of Harvard, it means everybody on planet Earth is a leader. Everyone because we've all got a story to write that is unique to all of us. If we get back our pen, we can write that story. Which kind of brings me full circle to my two guys running up going, we've still got our pen. That's what they were saying, is we are authors of our life story now. We base all of our training on what does it take to get human transformation. If I've invested my time in anything, it's how do people change? How do people in the poorest, most uneducated, desperate situations change? And what I have observed, there are 4 fundamental shifts that have to take place for transformation in my life, your life, and the life of every worker in the supply chain. 4 shifts. The first shift is the shift of the human spirit. You see, when the human spirit is trapped in hopelessness, it's not going anywhere. You can chuck as many compliance rules, training programs, whatever at that person. If the spirit is hopeless, nothing's going to change. What you were seeing is evidence, as I gave it to you in those early examples, of the human spirit waking up. We watch it. You could ask any of our trainers. On day 1 of the training, you literally watch people's eyes come up as they discover they have amazing potential, because nobody ever told the poorest of the poor that they have amazing potential. Nobody ever said that. So when they hear it, they start waking up. So let me tell you Rishika's story. So Rishika works in a garment factory in southern India. She left the training, the Leadership for Life training. She goes back, she says, I want to run a project. I want to do something in the factory. Remember, this is not the managing director, HR director, or any. This is a worker in the factory, goes back and said, I want to do something. So she ran a project on anemia for women. She said, anemia is a real issue for women across the world. She says it's a huge issue for women in India, because a lot of garment factory workers, female workers, come from lower socio-economic backgrounds. Culturally, they are subservient to the husbands, and they defer, and they don't look after themselves. Now, if you've ever had anemia or seen anemia, you know what it looks like. Your workers come to work tired, no energy, low affect. How do you think that affects production? A lot. Rishika sees this, so she thinks, I'm going to run a project, because if we could release that energy, they'd start looking after themselves. It would change their story. They'd go home different. It would change that story, and they would come into work with different energy. It would change that story. So Rishika does a pilot with 100 women, gets hold of the doctor and the nurse from the factory. 100 women they test, get on anemia medication, and Rishika then runs an awareness program for the other women in the factory. That's amazing. A worker did that. You want to get beyond compliance? Just liberate people's leadership potential. They will do this stuff. Now, in trying to sell this work into the supply chain, of course, the bosses say, well, that sounds like a lot of money to me. How am I going to invest this money? And that's why I think Marks & Spencer has been amazing. They have said, no, we are going to lead the pack. We are going to make the investment. But bosses of factories say to us, it's a lot of money. Why would I do that? We're in business. We need to increase production. Now, I don't want to skew the awards tonight, but let me tell you about the Mbiza story, okay? Forgive me if I'm skewing the results, but it is stunning. 2016, Mbiza Berries produced 80 tons of berries. 2016. 2017, they put the whole staff through the Leadership for Life program. When the berries are picked, later on in 2017, they pick, wait for it, 186 tons. That is an increase in productivity of over 100%, and the figures for 2018 are even higher. That's what happened. How did it happen? It's because everyone that we trained on that farm left the training seeing themselves as a leader. They went back to the bushes and they were no longer Mbiza's bushes. They're my bushes. I will look after my bushes. They pruned them better, they cleaned them better, they looked after them better. They made those bushes more productive. That's how they increased productivity. But not only that, teamworking went up. The bosses reported that harassment went down, swearing went down between people. People started treating each other differently. The workers who had been trained then trained 180 temporary workers from the Eastern Cape who came into the factory to pick the berries. That's what happened when you liberate the leadership potential of everyone. Now, some of you will be saying, yeah, well, we all love a great story, and that's great, and they're up for an award. Our data shows a baseline of 11% improvement in production. Now, I think that's a pretty good investment, isn't it? If I could improve your productivity by 11%. What's the second shift that needs to take place? The second shift that needs to take place is up here. Once the spirit shifts, then the mind has to shift. Without mindset change, the story will stay the same. If you come to work saying, I can't, it won't work out for me, it's not my problem, you won't. And it will always be their problem. But if you can shift what goes on up here, then you will change the story. So we work very hard on mindset shift. So Hajira, who works in another garment factory in India, she goes through the training and is both encouraged and disturbed because she knows she's got a big problem at home. So forgive me, but I wonder if some bosses realize sometimes that when your workers come to work, they're not thinking about you and the factory. And Hajira was such a person. Her head was at home. That's where the issues were. She'd got 2 kids. She's a single-parent mum. There's infighting in the house every night. That's where her head was. She knew something was wrong. So the leadership training was, Hajira went home that night. She goes and sits her girls down. She says, first of all, girls, I want to tell you something. You have amazing potential. Amazing potential. Sorry, I should have clicked those on. That's the Mbiza Parry. This is Hajira. You have amazing potential. And she could say that to them because she now knew she had amazing potential. So she starts talking to these girls. She said, second thing I want to say, girls, is I'm sorry. I don't think I've treated you well. I don't think I've treated you well. Then she said, one of the mindsets that I have learned that leaders have is something's not working, you need to change something. And she said, girls, we know something's not working in this family. Something needs to change. Do you know what it is? And the girls, without missing a beat, said, give us the key. Give us the key. You see, Hajira did not trust her girls with the house key. Hajira would work late. The girls would come home from school. They'd have to sit on the step outside the house every night or go and sit in a friend's house until mum came home, and then she'd let them in the house. They said, trust us with the key. Trust us. So they have a discussion about some ground rules. Hajira gives them the key. Hajira now goes to work. What happens at work? Hajira's head is now in work when she comes to work. And even the data reports around Hajira was, she's changed. She's different because her head's in the game. What happens at home? The girls now go home. They can do their homework. One of her girls has already now won 2 awards in education. Not only that, is they do housework before mum comes home. Not only that, they cook food before mum comes home, so mum and them actually have a whole different quality of life. It changes at work, it changes at home. What about the community? Hajira, on the basis of what she's seen with her own girls, looks down the street and she sees a woman who is running a little daycare job, has about 15 kids whose parents work in other garment factories. And what she notices about this lady who's running this little daycare business is they don't have any electricity in the house. So the lady down the road is looking after all these kids. The kids sit down in the dusk and in the dark. Nobody can do any homework. So Hajira gets together some people, they raise some money, they buy a generator, give it to this woman who now has a generator, and the kids come in for daycare and they can do their homework. That's what happens. What I'd like you to notice about a story from this, and we see it all the time, is what we call the ripple effect. When you liberate the leadership potential of a person, everything changes. We never tell people what to change. They change everything. That's the problem with the compliance method. Compliance tells you which box to tick. Human flourishing just gets on and ticks. What's the third shift? It's around choice. It's around choice. Apart from not wanting to pay money for this training, the other thing is a boss will look me in the eyes, and it's quite frightening when someone says this to you, is Trevor. We would like our workers empowered a little bit. It's true. Honestly, I kid you not. A little bit. You see, if you empowered them too much, they might get a little bit sassy or a little bit rebellious. Or what? Do you know what? If they recovered choice, they might want to go and work for someone else. We don't want them working for anyone else. We need them. So one way we can do that is to minimize choice. Isn't that a violation of human rights? It's an interesting thing. If you look at all the definitions, going back to Amartya Sen, the development economist, Nobel Prize winner, all the way through to Oxfam's brilliant definition of poverty, it's about choice. The human spirit shifts, the mindset changes, and then people recover choice. Now, what's the reality of what people do with choice? Let me show you. Lawrence, 34 years old, has got a child with his partner, and when Lawrence went on the training, he was very heavily into drink. And the impact on work and home and community of alcohol is huge. Huge. Lawrence sits through the training, and as a result of that, he cuts his drinking right down. As a result of that, things change at home. He and his wife then set up what they call a kitchen business. They are selling meat and eggs. So they have increased the family income into their family without Lawrence's boss having to pay a penny. Lawrence is sitting down with his daughter now that he sees that she has potential and is helping her work out what does it mean to succeed. At work, Lawrence started working differently, taking on more responsibility, working better. He then was seen by the bosses who have now given him more responsibility because they can see he's been trusted. They now use Lawrence as an advocate. So Lawrence is an advocate for worker grievances. Lawrence brings them to the management because they'll listen to him. Not only that, the management now use Lawrence for conflict resolution between permanent staff, temporary workers, and different ethnic groups. That's what happens when you give people choice back, is generally they use it pretty well. Just the reality piece here, though. It is amazing doing this work. It's amazing. But as we often say to our trainers, leadership is simple. It's just not easy. It takes leadership to bring leadership development. And just listening in this morning, if I could say anything, it takes leadership to go beyond compliance. You can't get there by management. I'm sure you're wondering, as I head towards the landing the plane here, is what's the fourth shift, Trevor? The fourth shift in human transformation is a shift in the human heart. See, one thing you can get, if you study 3,000 years of leadership understanding, we see it's always been understood that good leadership exists for the benefit of others. That our lives, to be fully human, exist for the benefit of others. That's the fourth shift. Now, we embed that in a number of ways, but one key way that we embed it is everybody on our training programs has to run a project to benefit their community. And I mean everyone. We've taken this program, and my wife took it to bits and reconstructed. We have a whole new program for LEAD now. We teach children from 8 years old upwards now with this program. And we saw it because we were seeing that intergenerational hopelessness was rooted in kids as young as 10 in the slums and the townships of the world. We knew we have to get in there younger. And we have to get in there younger because this is your future. This is the supply chain's future, are these kids. Why not invest in them now and get the worker you want? You know, we are retrofitting with M&S right now. We're not future fitting, we are retrofitting. Why not future fit the whole communities around your supply chain? So everybody, even 8-year-old kids, leave our training and run a project. So come with me to Delhi. Atil. One thing I've noticed, and we've noticed, as we've worked with the young men in the Indian garment industry, is their low self-confidence. Very low. Very low. And this guy's no different. When we first met him, you know, we wouldn't say boo to a goose. I don't think he would have said boo to a sparrow, let alone a goose. So shy. So he comes to the training, but he sees he has potential. He gets hold of his pen, and he starts battling with his confidence. And he goes home and thinks, everything within me doesn't want to do this, but I'm going to run a project. What could it be? He looks around his community, and nearby him, there are some travelers who are living under plastic and cardboard. And he's looking around, and they're disheveled and unkempt, and he can see their kids don't even have proper clothes. So he says, right, my project is I'm going to give clothes to the kids. So he searches around with his friends, gets some children's clothes, takes them to the kids, does that a few times, and Atil begins to realize the problem is deeper than children's clothes. Because what he notices, the men are always drunk. That's the problem. The husbands are so shot through, they don't work, there's no money, and they're just, you know, the alcohol is destroying the whole community. So he speaks to these men and tells them that they should change. And of course, they tell him where to go and clear off, and what do you know, and a bit stronger than that. So he goes back, and he feels stuck. He doesn't know what to do. But he's learnt around the mindsets of leaders that leaders don't give up. You've got to expect impossibly high walls, and leadership will get you over them. He was ready for that. So he goes and had a chat with his dad and says, Dad, look, this is what I'm trying to do, and I don't know what to do now. His dad is so impressed that his son is caring for others that his dad said, do you want me to come with you? So he goes with his dad back to these men, and the dad now, the men listen to the dad as the dad tells them about their behavior. What the dad then does is he starts inviting these men back to their house. He gives them a bath, trims beards, cut hair, whatever it is they need, clean, new clothes. What is happening now? They are being rehumanized. He gets talking with them, and he gets to know them. He discovers these men actually have got skills. So he decides to employ them. 35 families are now earning their own income, living in apartment blocks that they are paying for with the money that they are earning from jobs that they are now in, and their kids are clothed and are in school learning to read and write. Intergenerational illiteracy is being broken. Who did that? Atil. It's not a government project, it's not a senior management project, it's not a CSR project. It's what happens when you liberate the leadership potential of a human being. And I could tell you thousands, I exaggerate not, of Atil-type stories. So let me just end around this issue of compliance. One managing director of part of the supply chain, he said, we have their hands, and we depend on their hands. He said, but we need their hearts and their minds engaged. He said the training has made a big impact on that. Something has clicked in their minds to make them more engaged. This training has been the key that opened up something very significant. The Leadership Life program is like the cement keeping all the stones together. Do you want to know the difference between compliance and beyond compliance? Come with me to northern Senegal, where they produce what may even be on the dinner table tonight. Every day they have to pack a lorry and send it to market. Following all the rules, and the workers doing everything they're meant to do mindlessly every day, you can pack a lorry in 2 hours. It always takes 2 hours to pack the lorry. It's a totally mindless task. The workers go through the Leadership for Life training. They then approach the management and say, bosses, we think we can load the lorry quicker. And the bosses say, don't be so stupid. What do you know? It's always taken 2 hours. If you try and do it in less than 2 hours, you are sure to break compliance rules. They had got enough self-confidence through the training to push back on the management in a gracious way, not a disrespectful way, and say, look, this is how I think we can do it. And the bosses, who also sat through the training, decided to trust in the best version of these workers' selves. And they said, give it a go. Do you know how long it took the workers to pack the lorry? 1 hour. They did it in 1 hour. The bosses had never been able to do it in 1 hour. Observing full compliance, they halved the production time. The answers to your problems are in your workers. Most people only bring about, if I'm being generous, 40% of themselves to work. Because you don't want the other 60%, or bosses don't want the other 60%. You imagine what happens when you liberate the leadership potential of others. Another boss says, he said, retailers are doing lots of good ethical trading processes and programs. He said, but without this Leadership for Life program, it's all going round in circles. There are all these committees and meetings and audits and processes, but they need to be unlocked. The engagement of people is the key to unlocking all these things. And that's what this program does. It flicks a switch in the workforce. So to get beyond compliance, something needs to change. Something does. The engagement of every worker, and I mean the weed pickers, every worker is key. The releasing of the leadership potential of everyone. And what we've observed in partnership with Marks & Spencer's is beyond compliance. I call it human flourishing. Thank you very much.
Just very quickly, Trevor, thank you very much for those uplifting stories and staggering statistics. We should all cherish the pen. That brings us to the end of day one of the conference. Thank you to all of our speakers and to you for being here with us and giving us your time. Do join us for the drinks reception, which follows. It's sponsored by Accordia, a global professional monitoring and auditing firm. Their focus is corporate social responsibility and responsible sourcing, with particular attention to regional issues having an impact on labour and human rights compliance. So thank you to Accordia for their sponsorship. Just a quick reminder, if you want to come to the AGM tomorrow and you're a Sedex member, please sign up near reception. And if you're joining us for the Sedex Awards and dinner, we'll see you very shortly. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow for the second day of the conference. Have a good evening.